Good day everyone, we are the Gear 5 together with my partner Mr. Mark Matthew Catalunya. So we are assigned to discuss what is the true nature of contemporary global governance. We are going to tackle the discussion about various political flows, which focuses on the development and functioning of global political structures, which starts from the traditional to regional to global and contemporary. So, what is really meant by contemporary global governance? So, according to the United Nations Organization, this encompasses the totality of institutions, policies, norms, procedures, and initiatives through which the state and their citizens try to bring more predictability, stability, and order to the responses to transnational challenges. So this means that this is a unified structure between the government and its citizen to which they should establish a harmonious relationship for them to find solutions to various state problems, which includes problems in relates to education, to economy, the poverty, the hunger, and as well as the problem about the environment. So what do we mean by political flow? So this is a global flow of people, especially refugees and illegal immigrants that possess a direct threat to the nation state and its ability to control its borders. We're going to discuss nation state later on. This also refers to the looming crisis associated with dwindling oil and water supplies that threaten to lead to riots and perhaps insurrections that could lead to the downfall of extant governments. So extant means currently or actually existing. And also this is an inability of the nation state to control economic flows were dominated by MNCs or the multinational corporations. So these multinational corporations actually affect the economy of the country by paying high taxes which provide a lot of money and income to the state or economy, and with these taxes this is used to establish a buildings infrastructures, and this provides a various projects to the government or to the state. We have the environmental problems of all sorts, especially those related to global warming, that are very likely to be destabilizing politically. We can trace this back to the issue regarding the scientists, where they call out the attention of the government or those leaders to take part in the issues regarding or relating to climate change. As for them, we only have 5 years to live on Earth if we don't respond to their calling. And they want also to lessen the usage of fossil fuels and also call out the individuals or the humans to take part also in the issues regarding the climate change. We have also the borderless diseases, especially the malaria, the TB or the tuberculosis, and the AIDS or the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, which bounds to Africa, that pose a danger to political structures. We can also relate this one to what we have right now, the COVID-19 or the coronavirus disease 19, which started from Wuhan, China, wherein this affects the global economy and the economy of various states, and this mirrors to what are the plans of the government towards how to handle the COVID-19 and how they are going to provide or bounce back the economy of our state or of their respective states. This also, war is the most obvious global flow that threatens or threatening the nation states that involve especially those on the losing side. So we can trace this also to the issues between or the war between Russia and Ukraine, wherein they are having a problem, or some states like for Russia, there are some various states that cut their um, lose their ties with Russia and cut their economy. This is so because they want Russia to like attain peace between Ukraine. We have the global inequalities, especially the profound and growing north-south split that threaten to pit poor nations against the rich nations. So this is also true to what we have here in our society, the issues between the wealth gap and social mobility, wherein the relationship between the richest and the poorest is continuously growing, like taas jud siya. And we have here the terrorism that is clearly regarded as a threat by those nations against which is waged, hence the so-called war on terrorism in the US. We have also this experienced terrorism in Mindanao way back September 9, 2013, traced back the Zamboanga siege, wherein it is a war between the MNLF and the Philippine government, MNLF, or the Moro National Liberation Front, which is spearheaded by Norme Suwari. We have the global problems, which many of which is includes trade protection and liberalization, that efforts to increase political transparency and accountability that are political in nature. We can relate this one to the issue of the country Sri Lanka, wherein the government declares or claim, or the president claim, that they are experiencing bankruptcy in their economy, and they don't provide transparent and transparent reports on what really happens, and they don't take charge or accountable with their actions. So that's why we, the citizens, also take part in electing our leaders. We should also ensure that how transparent and accountable they are. This relates to, or this can be benchmarked to how they file their SALN, or their statement of assets, liabilities, and net worth. Finally, political structures of the nation states by the UN. This includes three branches: the legislative, the executive, and the judicials. The legislative are the law-making body, the executive are the law-enforcing body, and the judicials are the law-interpreting body. That initiates also a wide range of global flows. For example, the violence sponsored by Robert Mugabe government in Zimbabwe that lead to the mass migration of millions of people from the country. We have here the nation state. So we are repeatedly mentioning nation state. So unsa jud ay pasabot aning nation state? So this includes various concepts: the nation, the national identity, the nationalism, the state, and the nation state itself. So what do we mean by nation? So this is a social group that is linked through common descent, culture, language, or territorial congenuity. For instance, we have our country, the Philippines. This is considered as a nation. Next, we have a national identity, wherein a fluid and dynamic form of collective identity. Members of the community believe that they are different from other groups. If we are we are identified by the international community or the international stage as Filipinos, that's our national identity. However, if we're going to focus on our country, we have various or a lot of identification. We have Cebuanos, Boholanos, we have Leyte, they are called Warais, and many more. And we have the nationalism is a doctrine and or political movement that seek to the nation the basis of a political structure, especially a state. So this refers to how loyal you are, or how patriotic you are to your nation. We have the state, the organizational structure outside other socio-economic hierarchies with relatively autonomous office holders. Now we have the last one, the nation state. This integrates subgroups that define themselves as a nation with the organizational structure of the state. We have the threats to the nation state, wherein the nation state is especially threatened by the global economy and global economic flows. So in terms of global economy, nation states have become little more than bit actors. This according to OMI 1996, that refers to the borderless global economy that nation states are unable to control. The decline of the nation state is linked to technological and financial changes, as well as to the accelerated integration of national economies into one single global market economy. This according to Strange 1996. While nation states are once controlled markets, it is now the markets that often control the nation states. So, due to the various developments, trends, and progression we are experiencing right now, this this can be this made our nation state or the economy borderless. Kanang dali na siya ma-access. And also, this is true that the markets are now controlling the nation state. It's because we can trace this back to the MNCs or the multinational corporations wherein they have these are the private sectors which includes or affects the economy of a state. So if wala ang mga MNCs or the private sectors or the non-government organizations, wala sa dili sad mo progress ang economy sa usa ka state because most of them are high paying taxes or they pay multinational taxes that helps in the improvement of the economy of the state. And these taxes are actually um, planned out or distributed to various sectors and which helps in the development of the establishment of various infrastructures as well as address various issues. We have other factors threatening the autonomy of the nation state. This includes the flow of information, illegal immigrants, social movements, terrorism or the terrorists, the criminals, the drugs, the money, which includes the laundered money and other financial instruments, as well as sex trafficking and much else. Rising action and climax. So the nation state has become increasingly porous. While this seems to be supported by a great deal of evidence, the fact that is no nation state has ever been able to control its borders completely. This is according to Bauman 1992. Thus, it is not the porosity of the nation state that is new, but rather what is new is a dramatic increase in that porosity and the kinds of flows that are capable of passing through the national borders. We have also here the international human rights that is considered another threat to the autonomy of the nation state. This is growing interest in the international human rights. That is according to Elliott 2007, Chatterjee 2008, and Fredman 2008. So unsa dyan yung pasabot sa international human rights? We are going to discuss this one later on. So what do we mean by human rights? So this is defined as the entitlement of individuals to life, security, and well-being. This according to Turner 1993. This has emerged as a major global political issue. It is argued that because these rights are universal, the nation state cannot abrogate them or control them. As a result, global human rights groups have claimed the right to be able to have a say about what is done to people within, for example, torture of terror suspects and between illegal trafficking in humans. This is too far 2005 and the sovereignty of the state. To deny people their human rights is to challenge their very humanity. This is according to Nelson Mandela. In the human rights, we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that is stipulated according to Article 13 that everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. Second, everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and to return to his country. It is clear in this declaration and its articles that human rights take precedence over the nation state and that the UN or the United Nations is seeking to exert control over the state, at least on this issue. So we have the United Nations. This is the in spite of the myriad problems, this is the premier global organization in the realm of politics. We have the rules and functions of the United Nations as a premier global organization in the realm of politics. So the UN stands in opposition, at least in general, to those who argue that globalization has brought about or is bringing about this demise of the nation state. The UN also is a global setting in which the nation states meet and deliberate. So they address various political issues and also global issues. However, the UN or the United Nations is not merely a setting in which nation states met, this is also an independent actor. So there are the two best known state-based organizations in the United Nations. We have the Security Council of the United Nations, which is the main deliberative body, and the General Assembly, which is responsible for the maintenance of international peace and security. So this two base organizations present in the United Nations are actually spearheaded by various chairmen, various leaders of the various states and countries.
And now let us continue with the UN four broad areas. So first, we're going to tackle about the military issues, second is the economic issues, third is the environmental issues, and fourth is for human protection. So let's start with the military issues. So the UN was envisioned as a major force in managing peace and security, especially in interstate relations. However, it was marginalized during the Cold War I, largely because in the Security Council both the US and the Soviet Union could veto proposed interventions. So a turning point in the military role of the UN was the 1991 authorization by the Security Council of the use of force to deal with Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. Throughout the 1990s, the UN engaged in a wide variety of actions that were not anticipated by its founders, and which had been regarded previously as the province of states. This included first is the interventions in civil wars in less developed countries, second is the election and human rights monitoring, third is the disarmament, and fourth, according to Wise in Act 2007, and even the assumption of the state functions, for example, in Cambodia and Timor. So, however, the expansionism of the UN in these areas was tempered by failures in the 1990s in Somalia and Yugoslavia. So, in the military realm, it is also important to mention the fact that the UN has been actively involved in arms control and disarmament. Now let us proceed with the economic issues. For the economic issues, it is all about to promote actions that would lead to reductions in global inequality. And third is the environmental issues. So, for example, about regards with the pollution, the hazardous waste. So, which are dealt with primarily through the United Nations Environment Program. And the last one would be human protection, or which is all about a variety of UN-sponsored human rights treaties and agreements have protected human rights around the world, around the globe. So next, the relevance of the state amidst globalization. So first, with globalization, the nation state faces innumerable challenges leading to significant loss of control over economic flows and transnational organizations. Second, although the role of the nation state has declined, it is still an important political structure. However, in the global age, the porosity of the nation state, the increasing global flows through it, and should be a focal concern. And now let us proceed with the Benedict Anderson's Imagine Community. So in Anderson's Imagine Community, it states here that it is an important idea in thinking about the nation state. As a result of the development of pre-capitalism, it came to be conceived of as being actively constructed, socially and politically, by people who identify with the community that is represented by the nation state. So this concept is extended further by examining how the nation state transcends its geographic boundaries in the face of rapidly developing technology and increasing immigration flows. So emphasis is placed on the reimagining of the nation state in the light of such global flows. So the most obvious example of imagined communities are modern nation states. So to take a classic example is the United States as a modern nation state, where it was founded only in the 18th century by the European settlers who came from diverse ethnic and linguistic backgrounds. And And now let's proceed with the changing geopolitical scenario. The world can be seen as evolving through three stages. So first is during the bipolar or during the Cold War. So before we proceed with that one, let us first explain or define what is bipolar when it comes to during Cold War. So bipolarity is a distribution of power in which two states have a preponderance of power. So for example, in bipolarity, spheres of influence can alliance systems have frequently developed around each people. So for example, according to the second meaning, the Cold War was the result of the bipolarity since the positions of the United States and the Soviet Union in the international systems meant that they each saw the other as its principal adversary. Thus, it would not be surprising if the end of bipolarity should lead to the end of the Cold War. So second is the unipolar, or the ascendancy of the US. So first, let us define what is unipolar. So it is a condition in which one state under the condition of international anarchy enjoys a preponderance of power and faces no competitor states. So a unipolar state is not the same as an empire or a hegemon that can control the behavior of all other states. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States enjoyed the unparalleled military power, and the international system is therefore unipolar. So on the last one is the tripolar. So earlier, we defined a pole as one state or a block of states. So thus, a tripolar system could be composed of three states, two states, and one block, one state, and two blocks, or three blocks. So in this area, with the picture with the US, European, and the China as the three centers of the power, also it is examined as the emergence of the United Nations, as well as more specific organizations such as UNCTAD, UNESCO, and IAEA. So next. So global. So what is a global governance? So it is a movement towards political integration of transnational actors aimed at negotiating responses to problems that affect more than one state or region. So further of it, it tends to involve institutionalization. So these institutions of global governance, such as the United Nations or the International Criminal Court, the World Bank, etc., tend to have limited or demarcated power to enforce compliance. So the modern question of the world governance exists in the context of globalization and globalizing regimes of power, so politically, economically, and culturally. So in response to the acceleration of the interdependence on the world scale, both between human societies and between humankind and the biosphere, the term global governance may also be used to name the process of designating laws, rules, and or regulations intended for a global scale. Next one. So the new forms of governance, the first is governance without government. So according to Rosno and Gempel 1992. Governance without government management. So for example, various matters are managed within the nation state without the involvement of government. Thus, locals and regions within the nations or within the nation state may manage themselves. And now before we start or before we proceed, so let's answer this question. So what is a system without the government? What do you think will happen? So one of its example is the anarchy. So it is a society being freely constituted without authorities or governing bodies, and it may also refer to a society or group of people that entirely rejects a set hierarchy. So anarchy was first used in English in 1539, meaning an absence of government. And of course, or governance without government is linked to managed democracy, although it is a distorted version of democracy and too inverted totalitarianism and dismantling public institutions and giving power to institutions where democratic claims are not valid. So one of its examples are those big corporations and secret societies. And let us proceed with the second one. So the second is governance through various public policy networks. At the global level, this involves government by various international institutions as or In other words, it is an institutionalized proposal to solve relevant and real-world problems. So guided by a conception and implemented by programs as a course of action created and or enacted typically by a government or nonprofit organization in response to social issues. And finally, the governance at the global level can be normatively mediated and moderated. Also, it is included here are the efforts driven by values, including the Commission on Global Governance, as well as the Global Compact, created by former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. Next, well, let's proceed with the challenges of global governance in the 21st century. For the increasing promulgation of the global order, this reflects increasing global diversity as well as the array of contradictory forces that have been unleashed as a result. Among those contradictory forces are globalization and localization. So centralization, decentralization, and integration and fragmentation. And then the second one is the declining power of nation states. If states themselves are less able to handle various responsibilities, this leaves open the possibility of the emergence of some form of global governance to fill the void. Next is the vast flows of all sorts of things that run into and often right through the borders of nation states. These could involve the flow of digital information of all sorts through the internet. So it is difficult, if not possible, for a nation state to stop such flows, and in any case, it is likely that such action would be politically unpopular and bring much negative reaction. Next, the mass migration of people under entry, often illegally, into various nation states. So if states are unable to control this flow, then there is need for some sort of global governance to help deal with the problem. The flow of criminal elements as well as their products, such as drugs, laundering money, both and salt, sex, trafficking, and etc., is a strong factor in the call for global governance. Next is the horrendous events within Indian states that the states themselves either foment and carry out are unable to control. For example, in Darfur, Sudan, perhaps hundreds of thousands have been killed and millions of people displaced, and the lives of many more disrupted in a conflict that dates to early 2003. So next is then there are global problems that single nation states cannot hope to tackle on their own, and one of course, is the global financial crisis and panics, including the current one, and also that sweep the world vertically and which nations are often unable to deal with on their own. Indeed, some nations, for example, the Southeast Asia, have often been and are being victimized by such crises. Unable to help themselves, such nations are in need of assistance from some type of global governance. And now let us proceed with the INGOs, or the International Non-Governmental Organizations. So first, international not-for-profit organizations performing public functions but established or run by nation states. So they provide information and technical expertise to governments and international organizations such as specialized agencies of the UN or the United Nations on various international issues, often supplying a local information and especially the ability to pay some of the governments. So INGOs also develop local products and local markets, develop social capital and human resources, and encourage and motivate people to participate in such activities, and act as network liaisons between community and systems. Next is the first modern INGOs are traceable to the 19th century. So the International Red Cross was founded in Switzerland in 1865. They have boomed in recent years, displaced and the lives of many more disrupted in a conflict that dates to early 2003, just like what I said earlier. And on next is the turning point in the history of the INGOs occurred in 1992 when a treaty to control the emission of greenhouse gases was signed as a bill, or as a result of the actions of a variety of groups that not only exerted external pressure but were actually involved in the decision-making process. So next, the international treaty is spearheaded by the International Campaign to Ban Landmines, or the ICBL. The treaty was signed in 1997 by 182 nations, which agreed to stop selling and using landmines. Next, let us talk about the negative sides to the growth of INGOs and the civil society. The first is that fundamentally INGOs are special interest groups, and therefore they may not take into consideration wider sets of concerns and issues. So in addition to that, they are not democratic. Often their agendas are secret and are not accountable to anyone other than their members or their benefits. Next is thus they have the potential to produce canons on the global stage. Next, they are seen as annoying, busy bodies that are forever putting their noses in the business of others, so they always plug in. Or this is according to Thomas 2007. And the next is they often ponder the public opinion and posture for the media both to attract attention to their issues and to maintain or expand their power and membership. Next, as a result, they may distort the magnitude of certain problems, for example, overestimating the effects and misjudging the causes of an oil spill. So in order to advance their cause and interest, so they do that thing for the gain of their or for their own benefits. So it's also that stuff. And then their focus on one issue may adversely affect the interest in and ability to deal with many other important issues. The nature of the focus and indeed in the very creation of the IGO may be a function of its ability to attract attention and to raise funds. So as a result, other worthy, if not more worthy issues such as soil erosion, especially in Africa, may fail to attract much, if any, need really attention and interest. So in some cases, or meaning INGs conflict with one another, such as those wishing to ban certain practices. For example, the logging versus those that see those practices as solutions. Logging producing wood as a sustainable resources that is preferable to fossil fuels. But so next, the North's control over INGOs has actually increased, leading to questions about their relevance to the concerns of itself. Next, let us proceed with the IGOs, or the intergovernmental organizations. So these are organizations such as the UN that are international in scope. So INGOs stand to gain from such formal associations in various ways. So there are symbolic signs, symbolic gains such as first, the greater legitimacy associated with being involved with such an international visible organization. Next, there are also the more material gains, since such an organization might provide value-based funding to various INGOs. And last is the work may even be subcontracted to INGOs and they can earn income for performing the required tasks. Next, so these are let's talk about the dangers to INGOs. So they can easily become co-opted by the IEGO involved. So less extremely INGOs may need to become more rationalized, bureaucratized, and professionalized in order to deal with the needs and demands of the IGO. So this in turn can lead to a more subtle change of orientation and a decline in the radicalism in an INGO. So other possible changes in INGOs include a loss of flexibility, as they must satisfy the demands of the IGO, which after all may well be the source of badly needed funds. A declined capacity to act quickly, and perhaps most troubling, a loss of autonomy and perhaps even identity. So I guess that is all, guys. So thank you very much and have a nice day.